Okay, we are now live, I'm told, from StreamYard. Welcome, everybody, back to another live edition of Bushwhacking History in Buffalo with BerserkerBear. And welcoming back, good friend, fellow bear, TorontoJewBear, has a BA at the University of Toronto. Excuse me. Don't hold it against them, everybody. But yeah,
University of Western Ontario, actually.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, don't hold it against them, us alternative history buffs here. But welcome back, Neil, TorontoJewBear. I'll
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
definitely, for the whole brevity thing, I'll just say Neil or TJB, right?
Either way.
But welcome back and welcome everybody in the chat. We have Callistoga, Refried, Salty Dog, always good seeing you. Mr. Brees, my man, OG, Maxed Out Bear. Good to see everybody. So what's going on today? It's been a while. Last time I was live was the Christmas blizzard, as I was just detailing to Neil, that we experienced here in Buffalo. But Buffalo Waterworks. So it's good to be back, getting into the live session again. Sorry for such a hiatus, but I sprinkled some other recordings there in the meantime.
So, hey, the weather's a little different than the blizzard time. Hey, Dustin.
Sure is.
We got a heat wave here in the Great Lakes.
It is pretty hot, actually. I'm in the basement, so the basement is usually a little bit cooler, but it's humid right now too, so I can actually feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super hot and humid here.
So yeah, what's going on? We're going to be doing Buffalo Waterworks. We're probably going to be live for about, I'll be on maybe an hour and a half. Neil's got to duck out at about an hour. So what you see on screen is old 1902 map of Buffalo. I have our handy Google Earth. What we're going to do is do the history of the Buffalo Waterworks from its inception at the Jubilee intake. If you've been following along, I have addressed this all before. So this is going to be a 100,000-foot view of the waterworks and the anomalies that I have. And I'm going to show the crescendo at the end of these tabs here. And Neil will act as, so with his degree, and if you want to actually introduce yourself again, I know you have before in our other one about the Niagara Falls. That was a while ago, though. Maybe you're a little bit more of your credentials, whatever you feel about your family, or just so people who are listening who haven't heard the Niagara Falls one have an idea of your background and stuff like that.
So I'm up about an hour and a half, hour and 20 minutes north of Dustin here, north of the border in Toronto. I did an honors BA in world history as my undergraduate degree. I run a business, and you can see my business here. I'm actually at work right now. It's called sportsposterwarehouse.com. Plug. And but I'm an amateur historian in many ways. I've kept up with historical reading and research all my life. I'm 51 years old now, so I try to keep up on things. And obviously it was a mainstream history degree, but I do love the alternative research. I love the way alternative researchers think and how they dive deep into primary documents as much as they can, and even speculation. I love speculation. Nothing wrong with speculation on what went on in the past that's outside the mainstream narrative, because we all know the mainstream narrative is self-serving, the narrative of the winners, and we don't know often what the actual history was. So much of history and so much of our lives is what they call a simulacrum, which is you're presented in one generation with the history or the color or the language or whatever you're handed down to, and then your generation thinks that that's the truth and of everything, because it's all you know. It's all you know. You don't know everything that came before you. You just know what's been passed to you. So a couple generations down the line, you've got a simulated version of reality and truth. So to unravel those, to unpack those layers is really difficult, but it's fun to try. It's fun to try, and I love what you guys do, and especially you, Dustin, because we're here in the Great Lakes region, and just when it comes to Niagara Falls, anytime you get a visitor from out of town coming to Toronto, first thing you do, hop in the car, you drive to Niagara Falls because everybody wants to see it.
Indeed. If you're ever in Western New York area, you got to go see Niagara Falls. And that's another component of, the anomalies that we have here. Our chat earlier a while back was focused on Niagara Falls. This is going to be more at the head of the river and the waterworks that you could see. Well, they're delineated as waterworks, for example, on this 1902 panoramic Buffalo map. Now, heck, Neil, as a kid driving down the 190 here. So as I've detailed before, and as you know in common history, Erie Canal was right alongside the Niagara River. Again, this is just going to be a 100,000-foot view. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of every little facet. I've done a lot of this before already, so those who are following along with. But this is the focus of our stream now, is not just this little crib intake right here. And I'm curious ever since I was driving down the 190, which is the old Erie Canal, which is what I was going to say. The 190, the Niagara section of the 190 thruway, is literally in the footprint of the old Erie Canal. As a kid driving to school, I would look at this thing, and where are we? That's it. So as you're driving by, that's the water intake crib. Now that's the first mechanical intake of the water source of Buffalo. I'm going to have all the links here, all these links that you see. Neil and I were going over before. These are all historical newspaper articles as well as acts of Congress that deal with the waterworks system in Buffalo. So that's kind of a general overview. And now also you see when Neil was talking, you probably might have been like, what's going on here? Now, if anybody has questions in the chat, this is going to be a feedback thing too, because I'm not making any claims with this, but I do think, and the culmination of what I've been researching up to this point is pointing me in the direction of, and I'll shout out to Mr. Brees on this one, always tracking me back to the possibility that these radial system, the radial street system here in Buffalo may have been canals once, and the roundabouts that are connected, that's the radial street pattern you can see on the screen right now. Actually, can you see the definition of that? For some reason, the pictures don't seem to be coming up that I pull from my picture bank. Of course, we're getting grabbled already, but all it is the definition of radial grid, and I'll read it right quick. The radial grid is a gridiron plan on steroids. A gridiron is just like a regular grid pattern. It's strictly geometric, regardless of existing topography, and in some cases, changes the topography to better match the geometry. There go all you mudflood heads. They actually do account for grading and stuff like that when they expand a city. So I'm not completely dissolving that whole theory, but again, city planning and grading and expanding does account for some of what you're saying mudflood is. Anyway, if the gridiron plan represents power, the radial pattern represents power without subtlety. Streets radiate from churches, palaces, state buildings, and other emblems of authority. There you go. That's the radial street pattern. That's what we have here in Buffalo. And I'm going to show, maybe get some of your feedback here on this, Neil. I know you wanted to drop something, but I'm going to show a clip of a UB professor lecturing about the history of Buffalo for about 5 minutes. It tells about Ellicott and how he came to town in 1804 and the importance of the unique street pattern here in Buffalo, because it's very similar to the one in Washington, D.C. And you say, why is that? Well, they're two brothers. Ellicott, Joseph Ellicott, did the Buffalo street pattern, and I forget his name. His brother, Andrew Ellicott, is responsible for Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and there happens to be a great ski area in New York State, about an hour south of you, called Ellicottville.
That's right.
Excellent.
Exactly.
But just before we get into that, just for the newbies, do you have a map of just the Niagara region that you can show, like from a distance, just to give people where Buffalo is situated with regards to the falls and the lakes? Because it's a fascinating part of geography here. Okay. So you got Lake Erie at the bottom there. You got Lake Ontario at the top, and in between the Niagara River. Niagara Falls is right in the middle.
Niagara Falls is right here.
Yeah, and Buffalo is on the tip of Lake Erie, just below, just where the river meets Lake Erie.
Now this is, yes, you're right here, right where the confluence of Lake Erie goes into Niagara River. Now this also offers us, this brings up a good point. this also is what offers us the situated Lake Erie, that it's so long. Okay, look at the radial patterns. Now I'm saying that I believe not all of them. We're just getting right into it right now.
Just one point I want to make. All the flow of the Great Lakes from Superior, Michigan, Huron, and Erie, it all flows right through that spot right next to Buffalo,
Right
through
here.
the Niagara River. Every ounce of water goes right through that spot and flows eventually into the St. Lawrence and then into the ocean.
Great point, because that's one of the things where I think that where the toroidal current moving water and the telluric currents of the Terra that Eeyore and Woody and I have done recently, this is a major confluence for that. And then, isn't it, go figure, the air connection would be, this is the 200-mile, if you could see it on the screen, length of Lake Erie. That is what offers us a true sunset over the water. A very long time ago, shout out to Autodidactic Campbell, he's like, well, is that because you guys got the sunset over the river? And I'm like, no, specifically not. It's actually a true sunset over water. From our angle, the sun goes over the water. So you got a confluence of, great point, Neil, all the runoff of all the Great Lakes basin, aside from Lake Ontario, funnels through the Strait of Niagara.
And that's the point I'm gonna drop on you soon. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Now we're going to be talking about things like where these old, when I say ancient canals, I'm just going to throw it right out there. When I have this thing on the screen, I believe that's it. And the right side picture might not be exactly what was going on here, but we're just going to set the bar really high right off the jump here and try to fill in the blanks as we go. I believe I'm going to show a clip from Ancient Unsolved History with Leonard Nimoy. I forget the name of it. But CF Apps, shout out to him, a YouTube channel, and rest in peace, shared it a long time ago about Mystery Hill and a gentleman named Barry Fell, who's a historical researcher, more of a marine biologist. And the local author that I interviewed before, Mason Winfield, knew Barry Fell as interested in research. But Barry is one who posits that pre-Columbian civilization is for sure a thing. And just so you guys know, it is an idea that's out there. And I cited Barry Fell before. Also, Stephen M. Collins' book, Ancient or America BC. But Barry's saying that the Phoenicians and Basques may have been here. And then if that, is there some kind of connection with these canals and whatever? And
yeah, and to that point, the history we're handed down is that this was savage lands until 1492 when they discovered America, and then everything sort of flowed from the 16th century on up to today. But I think there's, like as you mentioned, there's historians and lots of evidence that things were a lot different than that. And if you consider the fact that, for example, Venice in Italy, canal city built on the water.
Boom. That's why I had this up.
1,000 years ago, they built it. Okay. So when we talk about, they didn't have the capacity or the technology to build these things. Well, 1,000 years ago in Venice, they built a city on the water. 2,000 years ago, they were building canals and aqueducts and dams in all throughout Italy and the Romans all throughout Europe. So the technology was there, whether we like to admit it or not. Now, whether it was in the New World, the so-called New World, or not, or how it got here, or what the contacts were, that's the stuff that's been obscured by history.
Perfect. And consider the possibility here. Again, I have to underline that we're not making any claims. We're thinking outside of the box, outside of the globe, the constraints of the globe, if you will. And if you could see on the screen here, this is one of my favorite ones, Neil, that I put up a while ago on one of my older defunct Instagrams. I moved it forward to my newer one. Mm-hmm. And I'm eventually going to go over I have a lot of old gravy drops on my old Instagram and my Twitter that I can't get into. But yeah, so this is Main Street. And just consider the possibility that these once were, you can see how it's just covered over by. Now, my hypothesis is that when you're going to hear about Ellicott coming here, I'm going to play that soon, actually. We got to get that going. I don't think that they were canals and operating system when, for example, Ellicott was here in 1804 making allegedly the radial street pattern, because again, the main history is that it is a radial or a grid pattern, a square grid pattern overlaid by the radial. So it stands to reason that they're saying it was done at the same time and they put the radial over it. My argument, my contention is that I believe the radial pattern was here underneath and not canals inoperable fashion at that time. I think that they was all covered over and ruins. I think that it's possible they were ruins in the Indian age. I think that it's possible they were ruins in the Viking age. They never. What if New York State is Vinland? I did a short video about that before. There's a lot of wineries in New York State, even down at the Hudson. When you first enter in, there's wineries all over there. Erie is similar to Eric Canal, but just consider the possibility that there were ruins in America 1,000 years ago, ruins. So I say, some might say mud flood. I'd say overgrowth and sedimentation. It goes out, it gets defunct, it gets forgotten about, and then overgrowth happens. What am I getting at? Yeah, they're not claims, but just consider that that may have been a thing. Now, there's historians that say that, like I said, Barry fell. I've also heard Norwegian historians say, because they haven't found Leif Erikson's southernmost settlement of Vinland, New York State might be, but they also say it doesn't make sense for them. So they posit that southern, that's your area actually, Neil, Nova Scotia, where it's most likely that Vinland was. They never nailed it down historically. And you'll have Norwegian historians say it does not make sense for us Vikings or the Norse travelers to just stop at southern Nova Scotia. They would go to New York Harbor, possibly down the eastern seaboard to Florida. Most likely they made it to Mexico. And if that's the case, maybe they got up into the Hudson and there were these old waterways and they were able to portage around the falls. That being, I'm getting off on tangents here, but these are things that we can talk about when this is put
Absolutely.
on the table.
Yeah, that's a higher level discussion. But when it comes to the 1492 Columbus narrative and all that, I think there's tons of evidence to say. I mean, just the fact that the trade winds take you from Florida to Finland, very easily. It doesn't take a lot of navigation. The trade winds move that direction, whether you like it or not. If you're in a boat, if you know where the trade winds are, it's a super highway.
And the Nordics, there are other names for the Vikings too. They're not just all. But Viking is the raiding aspect of it. They were called Nords. They were actually called where they were from locationally. But if the ones that went over into the east, this is why I think that they would have definitely been over here with established trade routes. That's another underpinning. That's for another video.
Yeah.
But
all right, let's get back to Buffalo here. Let's roll.
Well, if they were doing it in Europe, going all the way down to Constantinople and trading with Constantinople through the European continent, they could have definitely been doing it here. And as a matter of fact, they could have linked up those two trade routes. And that's what makes Niagara so important. This is the pinch point. In order to get into the interior, you got to be able to negotiate Niagara Falls. And that's where I was talking about the ruins. Okay, I was kind of leading my way back to this, the ruins. Now that's where the Wenro come into place. And that's why I've done the native research and my homework with Robbie. And he's a great asset too. Shout out Robbie Radbear. If the lucrative market of the fur trade, pelt, was so big that all the heads were coming here, European influence, the Beaver Wars, 1600s. The tribe that held the whole of Niagara was the Wenro, and they got overtaken by Algonquin. And the sparse information that we get from the Wenro comes through the Jesuits. Now, what am I getting at here, Dustin? If the Wenro held the whole entirety of the Niagara River, I guarantee they probably knew of these ruins. And it just go figure that I'm not laying any kind of blame on the Jesuits or anything, but as far as obfuscation of history, a lot of people do point to them. And just go figure, I would love to try to interview an elder Wenro tribe chieftain, but they got more absorbed into the neutral nations and the Hurons when the western arm of the Iroquois, which are the Seneca, pushed them out of ownership of the river. So I posit that if these were ruins here, not to mention the caisson or the pier foundations for the river, man, we're going to get into that now. Go figure. There's very sparse information about the Wenro, and it comes to us through the Jesuits.
Yeah. I'm going to be sending you down, or if I get to see you sometimes it'll bring it to you. This map here, I got this map a while ago through business. It's an Indian. Well, it's a map of the Ontario and Niagara region and all the native tribes, supposedly from 1784. And it's got all these names on it. Wenro, it's got neutrals, it's got
the Wenro. Is the Wenro right over the Niagara River, Neil?
Where is it here? I'll have to look at it again later. I don't know. I don't remember. But it's got some interesting stuff on here that I'll show you after. There's one name on here that comes into the theory that I want to drop on you soon.
Oh, okay. You don't want to drop the bomb yet? Okay, let's listen to that. So this clip is about 5 minutes, and the next clip is 2 minutes. That'll bring us into the beginning of the water history of Buffalo and the settlement. So this is a gentleman from the University of Buffalo in podcast form, just rattling off really cool facts about Buffalo. So here we go. Hopefully the show is actually Are you seeing that?
Not on my screen, but I don't have a YouTube screen open. So,
well, you know what? If it doesn't show up, we won't be SOL. But we'll ask the chat. Can you guys see and hear that video I'm playing? I don't know why it's not doing that. Shouting out to the chat here. It's not 100%. Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Let's do this. See if I can stop screen, present. Share screen. Bear with me, and I appreciate your patience. History of Buffalo Roadways. Let's go. There we go. History. It's not recognizing it. Window. Oh, entire screen. That's why. I got it now. Okay, work through it. We troubleshot. We got it. Now
I remember when you were just filming your laptop screen, Dustin. Well, you've come a long way,
dude. For real, I would lean it up. I still have that phone too. Honestly, that's great. Yeah, a progression of technology, right? Okay, cool. We're good. Ball game.
At the end of the Revolutionary War, Western New York was covered with dense forests and Indian villages. And in 1797, a person by the name of Robert Morris, he was a Philadelphia banker who had helped finance the Revolutionary War and recognized the value of land in Western New York. They purchased the entire area west of the Genesee River from Lake Ontario to the Pennsylvania border. This transaction took place at Geneseo and was called the Treaty of Big Tree, since the Big Tree Reservation was at the site, and Big Tree was the Indian chief's name at the time. This land purchased by Robert Morris was purchased by a group of wealthy Dutch merchants and financiers from Holland, and called the Holland Land Company, back over here. Wilhelm Willink was a major person or major employee of the Holland Land Company, and he was the head person that really financed and helped coordinate the purchase of land with the Holland Land Company. In fact, if you look at some of your property deeds on your home, that title would most likely be traced back to Wilhelm Willink and the Holland Land Company. One positive effect of that is we are fortunate in Western New York to have a clear property title on our deeds traced back to that time. So when we do transact a house or transact property, we generally have a clear knowledge of title and a clear knowledge of any problems or any easements or any intricacies in the deeds that may be a problem in sale of transactions. So we can thank the Holland Land Company and Wilhelm Willink for that clear vision of title in properties from the Holland Land Company time to today. Now, Joseph Ellicott, he became a large player in all this. Joseph's brother Andrew was the Survey General of the United States, and Joseph Ellicott joined his brother Andrew and his other brother Benjamin to create a surveying company, which was developed and hired to survey all the lands of the Holland Land Company. The idea was to survey the land, to subdivide the land, and eventually to sell the land because they wanted to make money. There was no use of just owning the property. They needed to subdivide it and move ahead and create some type of profit with it. So prior to its management by Ellicott, the area had developed very little, but he had foreseen the potential of New Amsterdam, which he liked to call it. The inhabitants preferred the name Buffalo Creek. So before coming to Buffalo, Ellicott needed satisfactory living quarters to be built. So he sold 150 acres to a person by the name of Asa Ransom with the stipulation that he would build an inn for travelers, which he subsequently did at the foot of the East Hill, which is now Clarence Hollow, and which currently exists. Now, Joseph Ellicott moved his office there in 1801. And then shortly in 1802, he moved his office to Batavia, where he established the main company of Western New York, and the building of which still stands today. Now, Ellicott was advised by the Holland Land Company to proceed with selling off tracts of land in their purchase rather than laying out New Amsterdam. But Ellicott shortly realized that we have to develop, transportation is important. We have to develop some type of transportation, some type of road system throughout this area. So he realized that the future of Western New York was in Buffalo, not in Batavia. So he decided to establish a road system that he felt would spur economic development, which had currently not met expectations. He liked the concept of running avenues at acute angles like spokes radiating from a hub, an idea first implemented by the Ellicott brothers at the federal capitol in Washington, D.C. So when the time came to lay out Buffalo streets, Ellicott used the same system spreading from a hub that is Niagara Square today. Now, this is an old map of the Holland Land Company purchase. The Genesee River is over here. So basically, and everything west of the Genesee River, all the counties of Western New York were part of the Holland Land Company purchase. Here's a picture of Joseph Ellicott at the time. Kind of a burly, husky type of guy, good as a surveyor. And here's some of the just a little brief information about surveyors and the equipment that they use. These are called surveyors' chains. Now, one chain from about here to here, the length of one chain is 7.92 inches. And why would it be 7.92 inches? Well, 100 of these chains would equal 66 feet. Now, in road reconstruction and road terminology, 66 feet is equivalent to 4 rods, it's called. You may have heard the expression, this is a 4-rod road, this is a 2-rod road, this is a 3-rod road. Well, if 4 rods were 66 feet, and it was 100 chains, 2 rods, half of that, would be 33 feet or 50 chains, and so forth. 1 rod, 2 rods, 3 rods, which was the basic type of measurements that surveyors used back then, and we still do today. We still use a rod designation for roadway width. But that was the standard width of roadway back then, 2 rods or 4 rods. And I think if you travel through Alden, Lancaster area, you'll come across 2-rod road and 3-rod road. So this is a designation of where that came from. Steel tape. This is some of the measuring tools that were used in his era. Of course, a compass, needed a compass to find out where north was, where was magnetic north, and many of the surveys and property lines were established off of true north and magnetic north. Of course, a protractor and a type of ink pens and other types of measuring devices. And of course, the use of geometry and trigonometry was very important to surveyors back then in calculating property boundaries and road boundaries and turning angles and such and trying to get the proper and precise measurements. This is one of the first maps of what was called the village of New Amsterdam at the time. You can see the center part of the spoke of the wheel, so to speak, was right around this area, which is where Niagara Square is today. Here's a little bit better one a year later, labeled the Buffalo Village, 1805. Here you can see some of the street names where we're given many type of Dutch influences or Native American and Indian names. Some of the names still exist today. Many of them don't still exist. But again, Ellicott's design was a centralized area of Niagara Square in this area, and the streets just radiated out like a spoke of a wheel. Delaware Avenue, which is Delaware Street at the time, kind of went vertically, almost due north from the center of the spoke. Here's that same area today. Downtown Buffalo is here, and Delaware Avenue, which is Route 384, spreading north, and the other streets, Sycamore, Buffalo, William, Clinton, all extending out radiating from the hub, which was Niagara Square. Here's a close-up of Niagara Square, Buffalo City Hall, pretty much as it exists today.
I've done Niagara Square before too. Now I'm going to play one more. It's like 2 minutes. You
Any more questions there, Katie?
No, Katie.
I got a question.
Oh
Dustin.
yeah, shoot, yeah, absolutely.
Buffalo from the point of Lake Erie down. Does it have a gentle grade downwards towards like Niagara Falls, basically?
Do you know
Or
what
is it very flat? Is it very flat?
As far as the actual elevation from the
Say from the lake shore, down towards like up towards, I guess, what, Tonawanda is north of you?
Not really at all. No, it's generally
No.
sloping. There is well, are you talking about on the shore or actually the actual river itself?
Like the city itself. I'm talking about the whole city. Is it pretty flat all the way?
It is
like
pretty flat.
As you get north?
It is, well, right next to, that's an interesting question, because right next to the river at the city, there's a berm, and it was where the front was, where I did my last video, where I went where all those cannons were. That's like kind of a high, that's why the Peace Bridge is on a higher, that's why the Peace Bridge starts on a higher plane and goes down into Canada, dude. You ever notice that? Like it's not like it doesn't start from the same elevation on both sides. The other side is, the American side is a little higher. And I have I think I know what that's from. I think that's from backing up of the canal system, because I think they were using the head of the river going into these canals, and once it got defunct, it probably would build up and build up and build up. That said, you just heard the guy talking about the rods and everything, and you pick up on the numerology there. Shout out to RV Truth. We're not Masons, RV, just because we're showing it. You know what I mean? I say
they
that
were probably Masons, Ellicott.
Yeah, probably. Well, they were. They were.
One of those things you have to get over as a truther, right? Like
Exactly.
It doesn't make them bad. It's not bad. Like these guys were, in many ways brilliant. I don't like the secrecy and the bullshit rituals and stuff, but they have some gravy, and they did a lot of impressive things.
Great point, and that's why I always bring up RV Truth, because shout out to him. We obviously don't agree on everything, but I learned a lot from that dude. But he's always raking on everyone. This guy's clearly a Mason. If you put the hand symbol up like this, or God forbid, I'm sitting here like this.
Yeah,
this guy's clearly a Mason. But it's funny. So shout out to RV. Anyway, you heard the numerology. Check out the elevation of. It's 36 miles. Niagara River is 36 miles long, and it drops 333 feet in elevation. True story. You want to talk about numerology here? I can go on for days with that too, but let's get back to some data here.
Okay, moving ahead in time, December 30th, 1813.
This one's shorter.
I think a day that will live in Buffalo history. On December 10th of that same year, General George McClure, who was the commander of American forces in the Niagara area, senselessly burned the Canadian town of Newark, which was now Niagara on the Lake. Then he retreated from the west side of the river. The settlers on the American side protested this burning of a defenseless town, an act of cruelty, but feared retaliation. But sure enough, the British forces, augmented by Native Americans, crossed the river and surprised Fort Niagara and proceeded to destroy Lewiston. 2 days later, they continued marching up the river, destroying the villages of Manchester, which is now Niagara Falls, stopping at Tonawanda Creek, where the bridges were destroyed by retreating American forces. So the villages of Black Rock and Buffalo were still on edge, but they were saved for now. They garnered militia forces from Genesee and Chautauqua counties, which came in to defend Buffalo, and confidence returned. However, this quickly dissipated when on December 30th, it was realized they were no match for the British and Indian forces that quickly took and burned the villages of Black Rock and then Buffalo. Panic-stricken, most residents fled the village, and all that was left were a few resistors, which were eventually killed or taken prisoner, all due to the senseless act of General George McClure. So Buffalo had to rebuild, and Joseph Ellicott was a big part of that rebuilding. He was a major player by this time. He contributed personal funds as well as many company funds, and he served on a commission with the state legislature, which was created to help war victims. This is also a reason you will not find any building in Buffalo with a cornerstone prior to 1813. Everything was destroyed and rebuilt around that time. Another achievement of Joseph Ellicott to Buffalo transportation was his realization as early as 1808 that other modes of transportation were needed to spur development of Buffalo. He urged the creation of an all-water route from Albany to Buffalo, always keeping in mind what benefited the company. He became knowledgeable about alternate route courses and served as canal consultant for the state legislature. To contribute to the cause, he persuaded the company to deed the state approximately 100,000 acres of its land in the southern part of the purchase, where Allegheny State Park is located. Once construction of the waterway had begun, his role in extending the canal west of the Genesee was historic, because when the canal reached Rochester, strong efforts were made by influential forces to stop westward continuous. It was Joseph Ellicott, probably more so than any other single person, who used his formidable political power developed through the years to push the canal from Rochester to Buffalo. So the canal was completed in 1824, which opened the floodgates of immigration westward, boosting Buffalo's population and commerce. It was called the handsomest spot of the purchase, and you know the rest of the story.
Okay, there were some notes in there. Ellicott was the canal general, surveyor general for the state of New York, for the Congress. That's number one. Number two, he went crazy later on in life, and I wonder why. He did geomancy. I've read this before about Niagara Falls. We'll close that, and I want to hear what you got to say about this. And the history of Buffalo water comes after that. That's why I wanted to preface with that. Why did Ellicott go crazy later on in life? Why did he off himself? God rest his soul. But
yeah, if I remember correctly, he wasn't even that old, was he? Maybe 30s?
Maybe 36. I'm not sure. I don't know. I should know that. But yes. So again, this is what I think. Like, I think that he discovered that there were these ancient canal systems and radial things, and he was responsible for bringing it back out. And then whatever, he had an accident. You want to talk about, Promethean theater, whatever. That's for another movie or for another video. But what if he did find that these were ancient waterworks and canals connected by patterns similar to something like, I'm thinking about, like, I got a picture, good one, in your mind's eye, something like that. Instead of those, now those are roads. Now row your boat, road on it. These could, I presume maybe these were ancient canalways. Not as extensive as you see on the screen here, but maybe what you see here, maybe Ellicott kind of was hinting at that. Why was he the canal general? And then now I think it's a good time for you to drop your thing, because
well, yeah. So you're building the narrative here that there's one of two things that happened. Either after the War of 1812, somehow within like a few decades, they built not only this entire radial city, because everybody knows they burnt down the whole city in 1813. So you built the whole city, plus you built waterworks. You haven't shown the water intake yet. You haven't shown the International Railway Bridge yet, but those were 19th century constructions, supposedly. So that's either they were that all that stuff was built without leaving much of a record at all, which is very interesting, or it was, as we posit, stuff was there before. It was being dug out. It was being refound, renovated, and reused. And for whatever reason, they want to hide that history. They don't want us to know that it was there, because this is the new world, and they were building a new world, supposedly from scratch, and that's the mental space they want us all in. That's kind of the dynamic there. So to bolster your point, to further to that point, I'll show you my little theory here. That's first of all, when it comes to the geography of this area, we have to look at things like, in modern day, for example, in China, the Three Gorges Dam, right? In our lifetimes, they totally and radically alter the geography of a large part of China. And they did that through engineering. And there's no reason to think that, based on some of the old world stuff we've seen, there's no reason to believe that they didn't have the knowledge and the technology even at some point in the past to radically alter geography. Two, we know that there's got to be native gravy out there, as you mentioned, and there's got to be some, and there is evidence of stories and memories of previous civilizations in North America. And we have the whole bullshit 1492 narrative and New World narrative, shoved down our throats from birth. So what could have happened here? So you're gonna show some interesting stuff about the unexplained construction. And I'm going to show you something here on this map. You're not going to see it very well, but we can go over it later. But we have the Great Lakes. Let me see if you. I don't know if you can you see that, or is it too glared? Is there too much glare? Anyway, the bottom line is what I was saying before was that all the Great Lakes flow into the Buffalo Niagara area, and all the water flows through there. Lake Ontario is the fifth Great Lake, but it's the one between the other Great Lakes, Niagara Falls, and then Lake Ontario flows into the St. Lawrence, which is where all the outflow goes.
Here you go,
from
Neil.
all the Great Lakes.
People can see it.
Right. Okay. Lake Ontario on this map and in many other maps, older maps, is also called alternatively Cataraqui. Cataract. Cataraqui. Cataract. What is a cataract?
Falls.
Falls.
Rapids.
Falls, rapids, rapidly flowing water, white water. Why would an entire lake be called cataract? A cataract doesn't make sense. A lake doesn't have a current usually. If it does, it's a slow current. Why would it be called cataract, which is like white water, like falling water? What if, in the past, at some point, Lake Erie and Lake Ontario were essentially part of the St. Lawrence River? What if this pinch point, Niagara Falls, is a geoengineered dam to dam up that area, to control the flow, and to create Lake Ontario below as a navigable lake, to create a portage point, as you mentioned, to get up to the other lakes? Because if Lake Ontario was a rapids, part of St. Lawrence River rapids, you wouldn't be able to get up to it. You wouldn't be able to navigate it, and it would be a problem transportation wise. So what if they turned it into a navigable area? And what if the Buffalo area, so here the whole pinch point now, what if that was all that area in between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie was at some point in the past part of the water system, and it's reclaimed land?
Well, okay.
So you see what I'm saying? Now there's two ways it could have been reclaimed land, right? It could have been underwater and part of that system of a gently flowing cataract that just keeps going all the way through the Lake Ontario area and down. This is just speculation, obviously, but I'm talking, high level possibilities of the past. And they had somehow, and I haven't looked at the geography close enough yet, but somehow at some point in the past, they geoengineered it through damming to create that pinch point, reclaim all sorts of land, and start anew with these. Buffalo could have been like they picked that spot for there's so many reasons you've talked about why Buffalo is a key spot on the map. They picked that. It was reclaimed land, and they used it to start anew with these new theories of radial street patterns and this and that, canals, etc. But it was like virgin land that at some point they took, and this could be hundreds of years in the past, even a couple thousand years in the past. We don't know, but that's the point. But my point is that geoengineering through damming is ancient, and there's probably damming areas that perhaps could have been built and just grew over with silt and grass and trees, etc. You wouldn't know that they were geoengineered areas. You'd have to dig into them.
I want to show. It's funny. There goes the neighbor's truck. It's funny that you bring that up because I met up with a buddy that I used to work at Hutch's with. He was a server. I was a punk busboy, but haven't talked to him in a while. He likes this type of work. As a matter of fact, he found me through Michelle Gibson. Shout out to Michelle. He's watching her and he's like, that sounds like Dustin. Is that Dustin? That can't be Dustin. No way. So he literally independently seen me doing my research on YouTube while he was watching Michelle. Go figure. But good friend. Then I haven't seen him in a long time. So we were getting back up, and the fact that I do this research, he kind of does as well. What you just said about a geoengineered river, unfortunately, we are right at the Black Rock Harbor that you can see right now. what he's going to say, it's a little wind, but I think it's worth showing the original because he let out with this. And we're talking about alternative history. As a matter of fact, Dave he's familiar with mud flood and stuff, Tartaria. He's one that believes that the buildings are very old too. I don't necessarily, but I'm going to try to find the spot. Bear with me because it is windy.
Oh, nice Bills hat. Bills season around the corner.
Go Bills, man. Yep. Now keep in mind what you just said about the geoengineered area. It's bad wind. I mean, how many times have we had a cool conversation?
It's been 20 years ago. 15, 17 years.
So we're catching up. And he comes to this river a lot. He swims in that Black Rock Harbor. And he said that one of the times that he was there, a random girl was there who was, she was foreign. She was from, I think, she's Africa, a black lady, younger. And listen to what she said about this river. He actually texted me this, and I'm like, whoa, Dave, we got to get up, and we have to get this on camera. But you hear what he says, dude? Unsolicited. Load in. Sorry about the wind.
Like some of the patterns of stuff that are going on in the sky.
Paying attention.
And she told me that she was from she was 18 years old. She spent most of her life in a refugee camp. And I think she was in Thailand. And so we got to talking about, somehow we got on the topic of some of the natural features.
Sorry about the wind, guys.
Here. And she looked at the river and she said, "This is a man-made river." And I said, "What? I mean, what? Why do you say that?" She said, "I know what rivers look like. And this is a man-made river." So 18 years old, from Thailand.
That blows my mind.
And so she had we had no conversation before that. I mean, she just came out with it, and she just knew, like just intuitively.
We were just talking about those energies. Okay, talking about the energies, we were talking about the telluric energies. What you said about the basin of the runoff of all that water, that carries energy, in my opinion. Water holds memory. Now, I'm just saying, I'm not, again, not a claim, but just that he had that information that he let out with, and he texted me. I'm like, wow, that's unbelievable. And then you say this. So is the whole of Niagara River a man-made river? I don't know, but we're getting some sideways corroborating data here. And what you just said,
there's just, and any, crime, so to speak, obviously not a crime, but you have your means, your motive, and your opportunity to do a crime or an operation. So if you wanted to create the Niagara River and the Niagara Falls, what are your motives? Well, there's a few. One is power, like you said, that flow of channeling and harnessing that flow of water. It creates an incredible amount of power, and the vast majority of the energy in Southern Ontario and probably your area too is generated from the falls still. Then number two, which we haven't talked about yet, is mining. If you can channel that water, like say a huge swath of this land was covered in water in a gently rolling rapids. Say you reclaim that land, you can start digging into it and mining it. Now we know that, especially on the Canadian side, the limestone mining and quarrying still goes to this day, but it's been an incredible industry for centuries now. Since all the from the 16th, 17th century, or I think from the 17th century, they've been mining limestone out of the Niagara Escarpment, and still do to this day. And that could be reclaimed from a damming and channeling operation.
Yeah, so there's unbelievable implications here that what's going on. And I think that what you described lends credence to the idea that these are radial canals, because that would have, so let me go back to, I have a hard time believing that they planted this thing in the middle of the river. Oh, where are you? With that current. Now here's the deal. At that place, this is what we're looking at. This is a bird's eye view of that Jubilee water intake. Now, the chronology of the history of Buffalo water goes, there was this guy called the Water John Kushner, legendary German guy, who in his time period around 1822. He'd sell water from the lake, well, however he would do it, go down and come back and sell it to everybody up here. And then we were getting water from Cold Springs, which is the Jubilee Springs, which I've done before, which is in Forest Lawn Cemetery. I'll have all these links in the description when I get time to afterwards, though. But this is the lineage. So we had you had the Water John, then you had Jubilee Springs, which is Forest Lawn Cemetery now. And then in between the Ward Pumping Station, which is our current one right now, right there in that round rotunda building out in the water up here. Bear with me. This is our current one right here. I've done that before. That's over the Emerald Channel. We could do that before. This is kind of where it's like a red herring. They jump over the details of this. I've been up, down, left, and right trying to find. Now, we know how they did, and there's articles. All those articles I have listed here detail the tunneling of this. What my question is, how did they build the actual, this thing in the middle of the water? Now, what you said about the geoengineering, if they were taking water away, maybe there was a lower level here. Maybe these things were actually here, Neil, is what I'm saying, as a foundation. What would it be? Like a Kate? I'm not even sure how to describe it. When this city was founded, in my reading previously that I did, the Wenro were here. And what if they had these ruins strewn out throughout the whole Niagara River? Like you said, what if it was an ancient power plant with the waterworks?
What if the other option? So the big problem with
I have a hard time.
The big problem with explaining how these things were built, this and the International Railway Bridge with the caissons sunk into the rapids, which is like how fast does the river run at that point? Like it's obscene. You couldn't imagine trying to build caissons into that rapidly flowing water. But what if there was a time?
This is the section right here. On the right side is the Peace Bridge. This is so we're looking at it from the Canadian side. The left side is the International Bridge. That current right there is at least constant 12 miles per hour, and they did work in 1870s. Both this pier, this little intake here, and the International Bridge. I can't find any detail on the pier intake here as far as how they did that crib around it. I can find diagrams and schematics on the International Bridge, but it's still, I don't buy it.
Well, here's the problem. You know, obviously they did that building at some point. They sunk those caissons to put the bridge up. Now, did they do it in the current? That's one option. Highly unlikely. Too deadly. Or two, is there a way that they were able to stop the flow of the river temporarily?
Dude, no way, man.
Or three, was there a time, according to my theory, where it was a much wider waterway with a much more gently flowing flow? So it was much wider, and it was gently flowing. And sometime in the past, could be 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, they built a bridge across the gently flowing rapids that were this part of the Great Lakes system.
We found them and built on top of them and said that in the construction of them, I really believe that, Neil.
Right.
I think that we're looking at an ancient waterwork. This is huge. And this is where it's like we're sinking our teeth in here in a springboard where I can go forward. Because again, I'm not being antagonistic here, guys, when I say, we're moving on from like Tartaria mud flood. There's way more facets to it. I'm not against people who believe in that stuff. I think we're looking at the same thing from different angles here. There's different explanations for mud. I think we addressed a couple of them. You got the reset, that could be the burning of a buffalo where they confiscated all this information. But stands to and this is where I need your help. I'm going to have all these links, people who are listening. If anybody can go through these things, I do it. There is no detail, people, of how they built the actual round crib. Okay, it's not the tunneling is detailed, and it's almost like that's a red herring too, because there's articles in that bank that say, "Oh, the Great Tunnel of Buffalo, the Great Tunnel of Buffalo." That's all well and good. I want to know how they built this thing. If it's so at that depth, let's go check it out. That's why I have this thing here. It's about 12 feet. Okay. I also have the water pressure thing here. So is anybody good at water pressure? So at whatever this is, I'll have it in the links, but pressure at depth is exponentially magnified with current. Not only that, the building of the International Bridge kind of mirrored the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And you can say, well, they did caisson work there and everything. But if you look at the Brooklyn Bridge, it's suspension. And the caisson and the pier foundations are very close to the shore. And like you said before, Neil, they could build cofferdams off the shore. You don't have that ability here. So International Bridge is a lot deeper. Let's go downstream here a little bit. So what they're telling us is that they were able to, in these two right here, 35, 40 feet of water, from what I remember reading.
Yeah, and the interesting
cofferdams at that, and
the only reference, just for everybody's background here. So the only reference we were able to find on how they sunk these caissons. Caisson is like this structure that goes from the riverbed up to the surface, and then you can stretch a bridge across it. So the only reference we saw was something from the Fort Erie Museum. They said they might have used cofferdams. Cofferdams is where you extend the shoreline using a dam in order to dry out a certain spot near the shore, so you can do construction near the shore. I guess theoretically you could build one cofferdam, sink one caisson, extend the cofferdam further, extend it further. We haven't seen any evidence that they can do that, especially with that kind of current.
These are the schematics that they say that they used during. I have all of it. I have the letter that the Gostowski wrote to the Canadian magistrate. But you know what? I'm going to show something really quick. We got time, because I believe that we did a good job showcasing this so far. We do have the schematics. Okay, check. And I do have that letter, and you have stuff detailed like this. But they didn't say that they stopped the water flow, Neil. So I did go through all of this stuff, and they said that they had problems dropping the caissons, and they said that it was done in like a 3-year time period. I urge people and I challenge people to look at this, and I'll drop this in. I'll drop the whole pamphlet in the description, and I want to know how they dropped these two piers online in that current, because the time frame, it was like built in 3 years. They say that's similar to the Brooklyn Bridge, but the Brooklyn Bridge, believe it or not, was an easier access because of what you just described from the piers. They were able to, yes, they used pneumatic caissons in the Brooklyn Bridge because they had to dig down in those caissons with manpower and pump air into it. It was unbelievably crazy work to do. They were suffering from the bends, stuff like that. So if it was that hard there, how the F did they do it here in the middle of the river? I don't think the current,
I don't think the current on the, what is the Hudson River or the East
nowhere
River
near.
was
it's
nowhere
like 4
near.
miles. Nowhere
near. And also, where was the manpower in Buffalo, New York in 1870? There's not a lot of manpower around.
So they said they had problems too, dropping. They had to do it a couple of times, but they still got it done in 3 years.
Yeah,
it took Brooklyn Bridge.
Manhattan had the manpower. At least you could find several hundred people a day to work on a project like that. Where are you going to find that in Western New York, where it was pure agriculture at that point?
Not to mention that we have a shortened work year because of the winter and when the wind blows off. I've showed seiches before. When the wind blows off of the river, it exponentially increases the height of the water, dude. So when those October storms start coming, you got to stop work. So not only do we have an unbelievably hard work area. Now these are the schematics for all this stuff. Engineer will say, well, yeah, they have the schematics right here. Well, guess what? I'm going to show you guys something. So shout out to Phil Drzinin and the Boogman. We'll play this also, because you could retroactively draw schematics from something that you've seen built.
Yep.
And then I think we're doing good here.
How can I explain lack of footage of actually building stuff?
That's a great question, because that's what I'm talking about. If I can't find footage from the Army Corps of Engineers, which I communicated with the librarian there. I've done my due diligence. I went there, talked to a gentleman at the guard shack. He pointed me to the direction of where to go online. I called. I spoke with a man. I spoke with the librarian. He couldn't provide me any further information than what I found independently, privately, shared with you, Neil. You've done your due diligence. You called the what'd you call 40 Area Museum?
Berry Museum, yeah,
They
that's
didn't
town
provide
across
any.
the river.
Boom. They didn't provide, because this was a joint venture here, Canadian and Public Works project. There should be video of how. I mean, think about that. Wouldn't you want to see that on a Discovery Channel or?
Well, there wouldn't be
or,
video in the 19th century, but there would be
pictures at least.
But
Yes, true.
but even accounts. There's no no detailed account of how they built those things. Those
In that
stories.
pamphlet, there is very briefly, and again, it could be easily. Well, listen to Victor Buke here explain, because what Philip is asking is like, if there's not footage or pictures of it, how come there's schematics of it then? And Victor Buke does a great job of detailing and answering, Phil. And then after that, I'll check out the chat
of actually building stuff.
If
How
you,
can you explain it?
well, you know how they just say they don't actually explain it. They just say they build it, and they don't expect anyone to question that. So,
Have you asked anyone in Copenhagen historical, society or something? Maybe they have some sketches or whatever. Any
there are
documentation?
always, they say that there are always sketches, but and that you can always see them if you do this and do that, but they are sketches. They don't claim to have photographs of constructions. I haven't seen, or well, I've seen it on the internet that they say that, but I
I
haven't.
mean, it's okay to build a small building, right? Like maybe these are not very huge ones, but when you have a huge one, you have to have some documentation. Because
Yeah, and
like
also
150 years, where's documentation?
yeah, and people in architecture today, they document every step of the process very neatly, and in every detail is correctly laid out. So you can redo the process basically, and you don't have that from the old world. You only have sketches, as if someone went in and analyzed how the building's architecture was, and then he drew up how it was with all the correct dimensions, like a surveyor.
Boom.
And then he created an autograph or an architectural plan for that, and that's what we have, and that's what they use as evidence. And they
Okay, that's literally.
It's a great point he brings up there, because what you don't have, you have a diagram of what's there, but you don't have a work plan.
Boom.
Right? If there was a work plan shown with dates and manpower and technology, okay, but that's just like you said, it's just a diagram of what's there.
Notice this. Do you see when I put this up on the screen too, Neil? When it says construct, I have no problem with them being able to do the steel superstructure over them caissons. And there again goes the red herring, historical red herring of like, wow, this massive, huge structures being built, but it's like, what about the foundation or the tunnel to that other intake, water intake? This huge tunnel, they're going under the Erie Canal, they're going under Niagara River, and they're going to link up. Yeah, but how did they build that fucking house in the excuse me, but how? It's like, yeah, but it's like, look here, but not there. So
Right.
what we're the rock that we're turning over now is massive. If we can, if I can't find out how we have a major problem. I think of the song Taylor Swift song. My wife loved Taylor Swift. Now we got problem. We got a major problem. If we can't be shown how they did the foundations of this international bridge, and these were here, then that lends credence to the whole waterworks. This was a ancient waterworks system. I got more work to do on that. I got to get boots on the ground, and it was probably overgrown in maybe even the Viking Age. Okay, this is the kind of stuff we got to consider.
But
here,
if you're geoengineering an entire area as a possibility, you can geoengineer that. If you've harnessed the flow, harnessed that current, you could easily divert some of that current into a canal system on a neighbor. It's like it could have been a massive project like Venice or like any.
Thank you for bringing that point up. The river, Niagara River is in a class of its own, and it gets often overlooked. And I wonder if there's not an underlying reason for that. I've watched so many shows I can't tell you about the Great Lakes and you're growing, on History Discovery, and they kind of always just breeze over Niagara River. And I wonder, if that might be a reason. There's because there's a history here that's not really fully seen, and we're starting to see it now. And again, great point with the current. So it's in its own class. There are no, I said it was 36 miles long. This is off the top of my head here, guys. It's the only river under 40 miles that has a cubic flow rate, or a flow rate of over 200,000. You were just mentioning the actual sickness of the current. It's people have lost their life. Scuba diving instructor, policemen have lost their lives in this current. It's extreme. And this is the work that we're saying was done in 1875. It's not borderline up to like the whole architecture, Tartarian architecture thing. This is on orders of level different. Okay. Yeah. There's pressures here. There's shorter work seasons to consider because of the ferocious winters and the winds that we get that directly impact. I've done this. This is why, again, that's why I wanted to get that reading out before. I was going to actually use a snippet of it to show a portion of my reading of this book, Echoes in the Mist, one of my classics. Just details how important this area was for the fur trade, because if you held the Niagara River, you held the commerce for people coming in the St. Lawrence. Another video is, I suspect the Vikings kind of did a underneath and went around that, hooking up with the Susquehanna and everything, but that's for another 15 videos. Consider the possibility, everybody, that this was a massive waterworks system with using the current to push canals inland, connecting to radial patterns out to Lockport and everything. Again, a springboard. I'm not trying to answer it all right now. I'm just trying to get you thinking in a different way without using the T word or the M word. You know what I'm talking about. There's way more going on here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So before I go, I just want to say, like, this is so much fun. This is what history is all about. And when I decided to study history 30 years ago, this is the kind of thing that fascinated me. Because you want to know how things got to where they are. Time is the human the difference between humans and animals is time, and what happened in the timeline before you, what's going to happen in the timeline ahead of you. And I just love having people like you, Dustin, to talk about this stuff and speculate and research.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate that a lot.
It's just, and you get that great rush when you come to some kind of realization. So the great thing about being an amateur historian is you do it at your own pace. You're not forcing anything. You're not trying to conform to anybody's preconceived ideas or research. The head of your department has a certain area of research, and if you stray from that, you get in trouble. We can go in any direction we want to, and
the bottleneck of
nobody
academia.
Can tell us otherwise. Exactly, nobody can tell us otherwise.
Yeah, the bottleneck of academia. I really appreciate you stopping back for a guest appearance here. And we got way more work to do. This is a LiDAR on your screen, and this is Grand Island right here. Grand Island Bridge is south going into Grand Island. And it's like, they tell us, Neil, that these are the mounds. They are landfill mounds. They built the heavy water, or they buried heavy water from the Manhattan Project, because everybody knows that you need to make a concentric like levels of terracing when you're. I think these were like mounds from the Wenro. Like they had if they held the whole of Niagara River, they had a huge empire, if you will.
Yeah, that's a pyramidal structure right there.
This is 3 minutes away from my house, man. So yeah, wow. The work that we have, consider all that possible. The waterworks, were these foundations of the International Bridge, were they here? And consider the implications of that, historically speaking. This is a rock that would tip over everything. And I do move slow, but it's a slow moving locomotive. I'm always going to get to the destination.
So no rush. We're unloaded. We're just trying to unpack thousands of years of history here. So.
Yeah, you hear that, Brees? Yeah, listen, just tell him what he said. Yeah, Mr. Always cracking that whip, man. But I shout out to Mr. Brees. I always appreciate. He was one of the dudes back in the day trying to be like, yo, yeah, but mudflat, I mean, come on, infrastructure, waterways, like you said, Venice is a possible. These are old world, ancient ruins in the time of the Vikings. Look up Barry Fell. I think we could close it out. We'll probably just tail out here. I'm going to go out and eat some dinner with the fam. And if anybody, you can dip out whenever you want, Neil. I appreciate you very much, and thank you for, like you said, acting as the foil. It's always good to have something to lean against. It's hard. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I was hesitating to go live, because having someone to present with, boy, I really do. It makes it so much easier, flows better. So thanks again for stopping
Pleasure.
down. We
My
got a lot
pleasure.
more to do for sure.
And all you bears, onwards. And we'll be there
Onward.
next year. Maybe I'll pick up Dustin along the way. We'll head down to Missouri.
Beartaria. That's right, man. Onward.
All right, guys. Ciao. Great to see you, Dustin.
Take care, brother. You too. Thank you, Neil. All right. So that was pretty much it. You got the LiDAR on the screen here. I'm not here. Let's do a back and forth. If anybody has any questions. Yeah, you know what? Let's do this real quick. I'll tell a story with that LiDAR. So another anomaly that I have here in Buffalo. Let's show it. Where's the concrete basin? If you see me looking at that thing before in the LiDAR. So, all right, you guys heard the waterworks thing. I'm going to start closing all that stuff down. I'll go over it again before we close out. I'd say maybe another 15 minutes here. Why not just close out my live stream? Did I? Okay, no. All right, this is another place that's about 30 seconds away from my house. I've always wondered what the heck this thing is. I call it the concrete pool. It's behind a fence. It's on a plot of land it's cordoned off from the other area that it's on, or that it's a part of on the plot, the land, because I also have the land plot link for Buffalo, the city of Buffalo. Do a lot of sleuthing over here. And there it is, empty. And one day I was just like curious. I'm like, well, what does this thing look like on the LiDAR? It's cool to be back doing a live cast with y'all, doing some hip fire. I appreciate everybody being here. Oh, cool. Thank you, Philip. You know, I had a whole outline that I gave to Neil, 2 pages. I think we hit everything. 2.5 pages I wrote, and I didn't even look at the friggin' thing. But that's just what it is when you're ladling gravy. So thanks again. I really appreciate that, Philip. Let's show some gravy. Morning Glory, good to see you. Morning Glory says gravy. Philip says great show. I enjoyed it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, Calistoga refried. Did you see that comment at Bushwhacking History in Buffalo about the similarity between DC and? Oh, absolutely. Yes, of course. That's one of my mainstays here because of the brothers Ellicott. It seems Ellicott or Joseph, the one that did Buffalo. I think that, gee, thank you. I appreciate your monetary thank yous as well. I notice them. Yeah, I question why Joseph Ellicott offed himself after doing all this work in Buffalo. We know what, I'm not making any claims, but all right, the concrete pool. Let's go look at it where it is on Google Earth. Okay, and I'll show you what it looks like here. It's just weird, you know. It's filled with water. Now the plot of land that it's accompanied, that it's a part of, is this whole corner right here. And I just wanted to see what it looked like on the LiDAR. Does anybody notice anything? Oh, hey. Thank you, babe. There goes my beautiful wife. Love you, Rach. Appreciate the feedback. My man, Mr. Brees. Thanks, brother. I always appreciate that. So, okay. The anomaly, I wanted to see what was going on here with the LiDAR. Let's move away from the alleged Wenro pyramids, huh? But let's go see, and again, keeping in mind waterworks, and that I think that these old roads were canals at one point. Oh, where are we? Here we go. It might not load in too great because I got a lot of windows open. Anyway, this is what we're looking at here. Does anybody notice anything? I mean, it's kind of very apparent. What you see as trees and overgrowth, again, overgrowth here, that kind of hides old infrastructure. Now, I'm not saying 100% for sure that this is probably some kind of outlet for maybe the old waterworks. I didn't do any research into exactly what this is, as far as like what I would do for that is walk onto that property, ask for like the manager or something, and literally point to that and be like, what's going on there? Professionally, of course, but that's kind of how I do my thing. And I will eventually do it, but I haven't done it yet. But anyway, looking at the LiDAR, there's a connection here. And the connection goes to what is now the railroad. And again, with what we're thinking about railroads and everything, old waterways, I'm just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? So who knows? That's the type of stuff that I got going on. And I really like putting this one back up on screen. And shout out to my wife, Rachel. Thank you for printing out my that image. Because I was wondering, I was going to use like a program to color this in. These I had this one on my computer forever. Just I like the way that it showed the broad expanse. I like the cityscapes. And I was thinking, I was trying to do a program where I color this in. I'm like, hey, the best thing to do is print it out and then color it with marker and then take a picture of it. That's what I did. So is that the exact pattern? Probably. I'm losing some radials up. There's more radials up here. It's just a way to visualize and get you to see what I'm seeing. And again, way more work to do on the telluric. We do have an already part 2 recorded, Ewar and I, about tellurics part 2. If I can get around to editing that. Maybe Woody could do it. Shout out to Wood and Nichols and Ewar. You know, the flip-flop crowd, whatever. Anyway, if anybody has any questions, I think that I did a good springboard, pun intended, foundational episode here as to what I got going on. And not to mention all the books that I could read from. I have content for years to come, guys, and that's not even a joke. From Buffalo to Lockport to Niagara Falls out to Oswego is even incorporated. Shout out to Big Bear. That's where Owen Benjamin is from, Oswego. That's another ancient city, ancient port that has a lot to do with the Beaver Wars and everything, with the French and the British and the Dutch fighting each other for this area for to hold sway over the falls. And guess what? I got sway over it now. So, and I got hindsight for 2020 vision, looking back. All right. Don't forget to smash. Thank you very much. Morning Glory says smash the like button. Philip says, I like the hip fire. I don't need a structured presentation. The flow state is always fun. Appreciate that. That's really good feedback. And speaking of flow, water holds the memory. Flow of the H2O. Top right. I wrote all that in, actually, make it more visible. So Philip says he likes the hip fire. I appreciate that because that's part of what I do. I've been getting a little bit more proficient lately in my editing skills. I use a program called OpenShot. It's not extensive or anything, but it is official editing. The stuff that I did back in the day, like TorontoJewBear said, leaning stuff, it was more of like layering on top of stuff and having windows open and playing music while I was doing it. There was no editing involved in it. The only recently did I venture into the editing game. So you'll have more tight, more concise, more palatable videos of mine because honestly, I do look at some of my older ones and they're atrocious. So I appreciate everybody being here for this long. And Iron Man Bear. Welcome, bro. Good evening. Oakland in the house. Just about when I'm going to sign out. I don't want to get too long in the tooth here and ramble on for nothing. So that was another live session. It's been a while of bushwhacking history in Buffalo with BerserkerBear. We had special guest Neil, TorontoJewBear, who was up in Toronto. Good dude, very intelligent dude, family man, and interested in the mystery of history. So without further ado, this has been another episode of Bushwhacking History in Buffalo with BerserkerBear. Live session. Were there ancient waterworks here that were ruins in the Viking Age? I got a lot more work to do to try to at least prove that, or at least show evidence of it, I should say, rather. So please stick around with me, and I will catch you on the next one. Keep it sleuthin'. God bless y'all.